Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's first half kickoff edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojan Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted on Tuesdays and Thursdays on WeAreSC.com and features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. First, let's meet Tuesday's panelists. A WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com is the Monday morass, yay or nay, and Sunday takeaways. In addition to regular season football and practice reports on basketball, he also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC, Marc Kulkin. A former William Jewell college defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge, and now has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge. He's a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. A legendary Southern California sports columnist, a member of the USC Athletic Hall of Fame, and a USC graduate, and author of two widely acclaimed books on USC football, Fight On, the colorful story of USC football, and Always Compete, an inside look at Pete Carroll's and the USC football juggernaut. We welcome Steve Bisheff. And a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes the Fridays, the obvious and not so obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle. I'm Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's first half edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news. Of course, on Saturday night, the newly ranked number 5 USC Trojans beat UCLA in the Rose Bowl 48-45 before 70,865 wild fans. With the USC victory, the Trojans, now 10-1, will be playing in the Pac-12 title game in Las Vegas on Friday night, December 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. The Trojans' likely Pac-12 opponent appears to be the number 10 Oregon Ducks, who beat Utah this past weekend 20-17 in Eugene. If Oregon wins at Oregon State on Friday, they will automatically face the Trojans in the Pac-12 title game. 3 Trojans were named on Tuesday to the on Monday, Pac-12 Players of the Week for their efforts against UCLA. Caleb Williams was the Pac-12's Offensive Player of the Week. Offensive lineman Andrew Voorhees was the Pac-12 Lineman of the Week, and Tuli Pelotu was the defense Pac-12 Lineman of the Week. This Saturday night at 4:30 in the Coliseum, the Trojans host intersectional rival and the number 13 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who are 8-3. The game will be televised nationally on ABC. The Trojans have opened up a 5-point favorite over the Irish. Friends, WeAreSC Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued, and it's free. And as a courtesy reminder for those of you that are not currently a subscribing member of WeAreSC.com, right now for $10 you can gain access to all the WeAreSC premium stories, analysis, and videos. The current new member deal gives you complete coverage throughout the season. That means this season, the bowl season, recruiting season, spring football, all the way up to next season's WeAreSC.com cycle, which ends on August 31st, 2023. So with that, there it is. We kick off Tuesday's first half edition with a review and grading of the Trojans' 48-45 heart-stopping victory over UCLA in the Rose Bowl. Against the Bruins, Trojans quarterback Caleb Williams collected a career-high 503 total offensive yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 by the pass, 1 on the ground. Defensively, the much scrutinized rush end, Corey Foreman, kind of has been out there waiting for him to kind of make his presence felt for 2 years, made the defensive play of the game by intercepting UCLA quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson on the Bruins' last drive to preserve the victory. So with that in mind, all the background business taken care of, let's turn to Marc Kulkin as our leadoff hitter. Marc, your overall thoughts on the UCLA game?
It's an instant classic. I mean, you go there to cover the game. and you try and be, as journalistic as possible. But as the game starts unfolding, you get drawn in. And I was drawn in as that game kept going. You watch USC start as slow as they did offensively and thinking, oh man, it's going to be like last year, and just hopefully not as bad as last year. And then the game just starts to ebb and flow. And, all of a sudden, you're thinking, all right, bad call here, bad call there. 49-yard field goal at the end of that first half. And you mentioned it, Corey Foreman, sealing the game out of the blue. If you had Corey Foreman making the play to, seal the game, more power to you. So it was, for me, just one of those instant classics. It falls into the history books of whenever USC and UCLA play, something strange is going to happen. And that's what it was.
All right, Chris, you're a little under the weather. If you need to take a cough drop or two, no problem here. Your overall thoughts on the UCLA game?
It was one of the 5 or 10 greatest USC games in history.
Yeah.
And a masterpiece. When you look at what was at stake, just about everything at stake. Conference title game berth, probable national championship game berth, a game that vaults Caleb Williams probably in a front runner status for the Heisman Trophy, a game that shows that Lincoln Riley has turned USC's program around in year 1, maybe not where they can compete with Georgia yet, but where they are a legitimate top 6-7 program in the country after 1 year. It had everything. It had the 2001 games. That was a 27-0 game against UCLA. It had that we're here and we're taking over the town feel to it, even though the game was much bigger. It had the dramatic ending of the Bush-Push game in 2005. It was a game that had these crazy peaks and valleys. Mark mentioned at the beginning, it looks like we may get run off the field. USC was maybe one mistake from getting run off the field when that game was 14-0. Yeah. And then they fight back, take control. It looks like they have everything in the bag. And then Superman makes one mistake by failing to run the ball for a first down when he could have. And now all of a sudden, you thought for sure USC was going to lose. And then you get what will become a legendary play from a guy who we've been waiting for years to make a play. And now I don't think he's ever going to turn into an All-American pass rusher. I don't. But he will always be remembered for that play in that game. And much the way Marc Kulkin is remembered for beating the Irish in 96 and 97, and those games weren't nearly as big as this one. It's a sort of game that was so great, so meaningful on so many levels, had so much drama that you almost can't do the sort of analysis that we do for the run-of-the-mill USC Cal game. It's just that great. And I don't know how long it took me to realize that. I was frustrated that the defense couldn't stop anybody. And then later, and we'll talk about that, of course. And then later it dawned on me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that everything was on the line, and USC played one of the most exciting football games I've ever seen and beat the Bruins and kept national championship hopes alive and showed the whole world that Lincoln Riley's USC is a whole hell of a lot different than the last guy's USC. It was spectacular.
I thought you were about to go Bill Murray from Meatballs there.
Just doesn't matter. Yeah. Maybe next time.
Well, I know somebody that's seen a lot of these games, even more than I've seen them, and that's Steve Bisheff. Steve, first of all, good to have you back. Where does this one rank in your library of great USC UCLA games? And then feel free to just ease on to your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, no, I think it would definitely rank in the top 5. No question about it. It's such a great rivalry. There have been so many great moments, but this one ranks right up there. I agree with Mark and Chris, just about everything, but I beg to differ. One thing, Chris said it had everything. It didn't have a lot of defense. It really didn't. I mean, it was like a tennis match. You had to try to
Yeah.
hold serve, and but we all knew that sort of going in, and the game lived up to expectations. It was a tremendous game, and I thought Caleb Williams gave one of the great performances in USC history as far as a quarterback is concerned. And I'm still a Heisman voter, and if I were voting today, it'd be pretty hard not to put him number one.
Well, I'll tell you, I saw this game a lot like you, Steve. It had everything but defense. We knew that going in, so that wasn't exactly a breaking story. I thought what amazed me actually is when they got down 14-0 and the interception that was thrown. It was like, okay, are they going to surpass 2 points from last year? But we really saw the culture, everything that Lincoln Riley's been preaching about this team, all the positives. You start, you're saying, well, what's going on here? But what they did in the last 3 quarters to me was absolutely college football puberty. I mean, this team now knows that it can do it. It's not a balanced team. It's never been a balanced team, but they are so great on offense that only USC can stop itself on offense, because I don't think anybody else can do it, maybe outside of Georgia and then maybe a handful of other schools. But it was incredible to watch it. I couldn't believe the ending. You've seen so many games over your lifetime and you go, okay, I pull this one out, file F, blow it at the end, and they go down and kick a field goal and what have you. But it was just absolutely sensational. Of all the games I've seen, with everything on the line, and that's the key, everything on the line, more so than UCLA, because SC still has a national championship possibility. That has become a real big possibility now. To accomplish what they did, which we'll get to the question further down the line, will this affect their emotions going out against Notre Dame? And we'll talk about that later. But let's move on here. Let's give out some specific grades for each individual and a brief comment. Let's start off with Mark. Just give us your quick quarterback grade, running back, wide receivers, offensive line grade, and a brief comment if you wanted.
Sure. Real quick though, Greg, I was going to ask you, because I always go down to the field for those last 5-6 minutes of the game. What was the reaction like in the press box when Foreman had that interception? Because on the field, I'm allowed a lot more latitude to maybe show my emotions.
Express yourself.
Yes.
Well, I have to tell you, for those of you that have not been in a big time college or NFL press box, there is a standard rule that they announce before each game that there's no cheering in the press box. It is basically like a library. But when he threw that interception, all I could hear was people going, "Oh my God," or "Oh Jesus." I mean, it was like a complete, just total enthusiasm or shock, depending on which team you're covering. It was like, did that really happen? And
I was just curious if there was any outburst, accidental outburst, I guess I should say.
Yeah. I mean, it just came. I know I said, "Oh my God," did that? It was like you came out with about 2 or 3 words, and then you were just like, it was breathtaking. I mean, and you had to kind of collect yourself and say, did this really just happen? And it did happen. And they showed it on replay a number of times, and it was still hard to believe, given that moment that happened. It was just amazing.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So to the grades, right?
Right.
Quarterback. I'm going to be real brief about this. I'm giving the entire offense across the board an A, because like Chris said, it just doesn't matter. That they passed such a test at such a high level, that for me, A's across the board. Caleb Williams, career high, throwing the ball again. You mentioned the the one mistake. He actually had, you know, the interception. I'm getting a little tired of this, 2 games in a row now for him. Is he regressing? I don't know, but we'll have to talk to Caleb about that. Running backs, look, was Travis Dye missing from the game? I mean, and obviously we missed Travis, but Austin Jones, Rayleigh Brown, Darwin Barlow, they all got in, they all had their opportunities, and they all did very well. Rayleigh looks like a freshman. Hopefully we can get that out of his system by next year, or by Notre Dame, hopefully. But Austin and Darwin, they ran hard. So A's. Offensive line, it got better when they brought in Bobby Haskins for Mason Murphy. I think Mason, I don't know if the moment was too big, but UCLA had a couple of good speed rushers, the Murphy brothers, and I think he was having some problems. They brought in Haskins, and I think they played a little bit better from that point forward. So there you go. Oh, wide receivers, my gosh. They're fantastic.
And by the way,
yeah. Jordan Addison returned, 11 receptions, 178 yards. One of the most well-conceived plays that we've seen at USC in a long time, when they had him lining up in the backfield and basically ran a long wheel route with him, and it's fantastic. And he talked about it after the game, how, you know, they taught him, you got to make sure you get down low, you know, cover up your number so they can't see who's back there. And that was all part of the whole scheme to make it turn into a perfect pass on touchdown. So overall for the offense, you throw away that first quarter. That's an outlier. Hopefully, although it has been 3 games in a row where they're getting out of the box slow. I'm still giving the offensive an A.
okay.
48 points is going to get the job done, especially as Chris pointed out very eloquently. So much was on the line with so many different aspects going on.
All right, Chris, pontificate how best you want to address this, one big grade or whatever you want to do.
I'm going to give an A+ to everybody. Here's the thing. We could point to stuff in the first quarter. We could point to the mistake in not scrambling for a first down. We could point to pass protection breaking down that led to the punt. The reality is that this is a team that put up 48 points, could have easily been over 50, put up 650 yards or thereabouts, and featured one of the greatest individual performances in USC history.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember. I mean, when I think the great performances over the last 20, 25 years, I mean, you think of Reggie Bush against Fresno State, but that was Fresno State. And it was an important game because USC was undefeated, but I don't know that I've ever seen a USC player do that on this stage. I mean, 500 yards of total offense. And Caleb Williams made plays. He made a throw in that game that only 4 people on the planet can make.
I don't know how that ball got there.
When he was sprinting to his left to the sideline. He throws across his body, throws an absolute dart to Kyle Ford in a small window. Patrick Mahomes can make that throw. Josh Allen can make that throw. Aaron Rodgers can make that throw, and Caleb Williams can make that throw. And that's it. And the reality is, if he doesn't win the Heisman, it's because Heisman voters don't understand what it looks like to be the best football player in the country, because Stroud is not in the same universe as Caleb Williams. And that's despite the fact that Caleb Williams will sometimes act like a sophomore. But he's a sophomore from Krypton. He's a sophomore that can do things that no one else in college football can do, and nobody's been able to do in college football for years. He's extraordinary. Look, the running backs played well. They ran hard. The wide receivers played well. It was great to get Jordan Addison back. He is a difference maker and a superstar. The offensive line did what it had to do. 48 points, 650 yards. What am I going to say? But more and more, this season comes back to Caleb Williams not only being what we expected him to be, but being more than we expected him to be. and showing that next year he's going to be the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft and may very well be the next Patrick Mahomes. He's that good. Extraordinary player, amazing offensive performance. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Steve-O?
Well, anything I'm going to say now is redundant. I think I feel the same way. I give A's to everybody on the offense except Williams. I give an A+. Williams was just above everyone, but the rest of the running backs, the offensive line, the wide receivers were all fabulous. I thought they all played well. I thought the offensive line was blowing UCLA out on runs. I mean, it's the first time in a long time I've seen that happen. And I remember thinking about through a couple of those places, this is the same guys Clay Helton coached. I couldn't believe it, but they really did maul them up front, and it was fun to watch. And it was one of those games you're going to remember, and Caleb Williams is one of those players you're certainly going to remember.
What was a better catch, the Todd Washington snatch on that sideline pass that Chris described, or Kyle Ford's touchdown grab, 2 hands over the defender?
Right.
Both great throws too.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to give them all A's for the most part. I guys are going to drop balls once in a while. Running backs are going to get tripped up. Yes, there was a big difference when Bobby Haskins came in. Maybe the moment was too big for Mason Murphy at left tackle, but I don't, it was such a brilliant performance for the most part in the pressure that there's not anything anybody else could add. You guys all touched on it. So I'm going to use my judicial powers here and say that the overall grade for the offense would be an A. So let's move on now and turn to the defense, and let's give out some specific grades for individual defensive unit and a brief comment. So Mark, comments on the defense, like rush ends, linemen, linebackers, secondary.
Sure. Look, if we're going to start with the defensive line, rush ends, you 2 words, Thule, Foreman. It starts there and it ends there as far as where that defense was. Thule, you literally, at the beginning of the game, you could see how Grinch had designed just to keep moving around so UCLA couldn't, always, have a guy on him, so to speak. And UCLA adjusted to that a little bit. Nevertheless, I really hope Trojan fans are appreciating the talent that they get to watch with him, because he's an amazing player. Tyrone Taleni, with that sack, forced fumble, that might have been one of the turning points of the game. Ray Foreman, again, it's always going to come back to that game-clinching interception. The linebackers, look, Shane Lee, Raylan Goforth, Eric Gentry, he wasn't able to give it, he wasn't able to go, but they had an impact. When you put those 2 units together, UCLA got their rush numbers up there around 200 yards. But remember, coming into that game, Zach Charbonnet was held to 8 yards as, tackled for loss, or 8 yards the entire season. USC had him for 10 yards as behind the line of scrimmage, and they held him below 100 yards for the game and no touchdown. So your rush defense starts with that front 7, an A, right across the board there. The secondary, 3 more interceptions, one of them to Corey Foreman. But again, there wasn't a lot of defense played, but it was USC's opportunistic defense making plays when they had to. Sure, they gave up 45 points. DTR he's a great college quarterback who gives defensive fits, and you got to tip your hat to him. He made some bad decisions, and it came back to hurt him, and it hurt the team. So as far as an overall grade, they're not going to get an A. I'm going to give them a B+.
Okay, Chris, you're coming from a defensive point of view.
I know that upsets you, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, Steve will get his chance. All right, Chris, what'd you think of the defensive performance?
I'm going to give them an NA, not applicable. And I'll tell you why. USC's defense was at a mismatch. This was a mismatch. They don't have nearly the talent that UCLA has on its offense. They don't have nearly the experience that UCLA has in their offense. When you have a UCLA, DTR is an extremely experienced guy and a fantastic athlete. Charbonnet is a stud. The offensive line is big and powerful. Bobo is a very good big-bodied receiver. And we forget that after watching Chip Kelly in the NFL, after watching whatever it is he was doing his first 4 years at UCLA, you forget that Chip Kelly is one of the great offensive tacticians of the last 20, 25 years in college football. More than anybody else, he changed the way college offenses play. They changed the rules because of the way Chip Kelly's offenses played. And so we knew going in that USC's defense was not going to be able to shut down those guys. Those guys are better than what USC has on defense. They are. They just are. We all knew it. The question was, are those guys going to find a way to get the key stops that we need to get to win the game? And the answer is yes, they did. And from my perspective, criticizing the defensive performance is sort of like criticizing Rocky Balboa because he lost a bunch of rounds to Apollo Creed, a guy that he has no business competing with, right? I mean, he finds a way to win the fight in the 15th round. That's the only thing that matters. USC gets 4 turnovers in a game where they had no prayer of stopping an offense that was substantially better than they were. No prayer. They got a stop early in the game, a 3-and-out on the first possession, and every once in a while something good would happen, usually a penalty, and then UCLA wouldn't get a first down. But on an even playing field, USC's defense can't compete with those guys, and not many defenses can. So I don't care about any of that. The question coming in is, can you guys just get enough stops against a great offensive unit with a great offensive coach to let our great offense win the game? And the answer is yes. Thrilled. Tuli was awesome. He's always awesome. We're going to miss that guy. Best defensive player we've had since Leonard Williams, probably. And frankly, right now, I think he may be better than Leonard Williams. That's saying something. Corey Foreman, I've seen a lot of comments from Trojans talking about how, maybe this will be the catalyst and now he'll turn into the player everybody wanted him to be. No, he's not. Unless they're going to put him at corner where breaking on passes and picking them off is a key skill set. No, he's not. But that's not the point. The point is the kid made the biggest play of the season. And if USC goes on to make the playoff, one of the biggest plays in USC football history, probably a top 20 play. And he will always be remembered for that. It's fantastic. I'm not going to give any grades to the defense. They did what we needed them to do and allowed USC to pull out a win where it looked almost certain with 2 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock that USC was going to lose, and it would be a loss that would frankly destroy the season. It wouldn't destroy the program. Program's on an upward trajectory. The defensive talent is going to get a lot better, frankly, probably starting next year. It wouldn't have destroyed that, but it would have ruined this season in a very real and substantial way. The defense did what they had to do. That's enough for me.
Steve, your thoughts? I know that you've been very, how should I put it?
No, I mean, I agree with Chris about they did what they needed to do. I absolutely get it.
I'm living in the euphoria, Steve. Excuse me.
I can't see how Mark could give them an A. I mean, they were shredded all night.
I didn't say A.
I thought you said overall you were going to give them an A.
I said
at
B
the
plus.
end.
I said B
B
plus.
plus. I can't see how you give them a B plus.
I think we need to go to the replay.
I don't, maybe us old guys who, from another era can appreciate great defense. Maybe we'd see it a little differently than you guys, but that one play one time when SC went up by 10 and you were finally, you thought you could breathe and they were going to pull away. And then one play, they go 70 yards, UCLA. And at that point, I remember saying, come on, you got to be able to stop something. It was depressing. And I realized the talent level, but I'm going to, you can't deny that they gave up all those yards and all those points. And you cannot deny that every USC fan in the place thought at the end there was enough time, the way the game had been all night, that UCLA was going to go down and at least kick the tying field goal or score a touchdown and win and take everything out. And, Corey Foreman, of all people, steps up. It was a great script, but I'm sorry, I can't give them a high grade on defense. I don't want to degrade them by giving them a grade I really believe they might have, but they got the job done. They created some turnovers, but it was not by any stretch of the imagination a good defensive performance on either side.
Well, I'm going to go to what Mark said. They've been opportunistic, and they did it again. And that's credit to them, no doubt about it. Credit to the coaching staff for getting them in the right defense, giving them an opportunity to get the play of the game. But, I guess I have to say that I'm a card-carrying Steve Bisheff fan when it comes to defense. And although they played hard, if you would have told me before the game that Charbonnet would not get 100 yards rushing, I'd say, what'd they do? Did they switch uniforms with somebody? But they did. And, they held them under, and they deserve all the credit in the world for that. But there was some secondary breakdowns. One of them was just absolutely horrendous to me in the first half. And I just go, this is a problem. And I tell you what the problem is. Winning is like cosmetics. You can put it on, but you can't disguise what's underneath. And what I mean by that is, had UCLA, and I know, had they done this and had they done that, but if UCLA had pulled that game out, we wouldn't be talking about Corey Foreman. We would say, what a great game Caleb Williams had. Isn't it a shame? But we would say, well, what do you expect? They gave up 42 points, 43 points. It goes back to the winning Rose Bowl kick some years ago against Penn State. If that kick by Bormeister doesn't go through, you're not talking about what a great game it was. You're going to be talking about how could you give up that many points and expect to win? And my feeling is they played hard. They played awfully hard. I mean, even Shane Lee got an interception, which was a credit to him. It was a game type of play that all adds up, but not an A by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion. I would give him. Well, I'll wait till the very end here to say it, but they played hard. You can't take away the interceptions. Those were outstanding interceptions that were made.
Or the fumble.
And the fumble, absolutely. One person I do want to mention that I think is getting better and better and better, and it wouldn't shock me if he's starting all the time now, is Tyrone Tellini. They saw something in this guy when they took him out of Kansas State. That was, this guy could play, and he is becoming more of a force just by his attitude and the way he plays with physicality. I mean, he is a rather older player on a college football team, but he's the type of player you look at and you go, this guy wants it. This guy is coachable, and look what he's doing now. And it really helps Tui Pelotu because it gives him a chance that they can't totally concentrate on him. And yes, I agree with Mark, that fumble that he created, on DTR was exceptional. So, Chris, you want to just Mark, your for the record, your grade for the defense?
Steve, B+, by any means necessary. I'm a defensive guy at heart too, but again, against UCLA, USC, those games are always high scoring. So even good USC defensive teams have given up a lot of points. I'm just taking it for what it's worth this year.
Okay, fair enough, Chris.
I'm going to give him the NA like I did before. And I'll make one other comment. It's really hard to play defense in college football these days.
It is.
That Georgia defense last year was about as good a defense as we've seen since USC's in 2008. Alabama had some great ones too. But Nick Saban said it a year or two ago. He said, good defense does not beat good offense anymore. That Georgia defense that was so dominant, they give up 41 points in the SEC championship game. Alabama has given up 40-plus points multiple times over the last few years. And Nick Saban is as good a defensive coach as has ever lived. USC's not very good defensively. They're not. They don't have much talent. I don't know whether or not Grinch is the answer long-term at DC. I have no idea. I know this. It's hard to play defense in college football. It's really hard to play defense in college football where you have a team that can run, that can throw, that has a quarterback that can run and has an experienced offensive line and has a coach that's really good at setting up plays and getting his fast guys in space. They gave up way too many points. And some of those plays were downright embarrassing. I agree. I don't care. I don't care because in that game, the only thing that mattered was finding a way to win. And remarkably, they found a way to win when it looked like all is lost. So it is what it is. NA, I don't care.
All right, so be it. Let it be written, let it be done. Steve?
Well, I think you might care, Chris, in a few weeks if USC is fortunate enough to get into the big playoffs, because you can't name me the last all offense, no defense team that has won a national championship. It hasn't happened.
They can't compete. They can't compete with Georgia this year. They can't.
Okay.
They can't.
As long as we agree. No, I think the defense, I think it's unfair to give them a grade. I was greatly impressed that they held Charbonneau under 100 yards, and I still can't figure out why Chip Kelly didn't run him more than he did, because every time he did, it looked like he got a first down. But they did stop him, and they held him under 100 yards, and they got the turnovers they needed. So you have to say it was a strange game defensively.
I'll go with a straight B. I think I've already listened to what our panelists have said. For me, it was a B, given the situation, but I'm not overly convinced, as Steve said, that when they face somebody at the elite level, we'll see. But so far, so good. And I agree with Chris. You know, it's all about the scoreboard at some level. But when you lose, then it's about a lot of points. All right. Let's just talk a little bit about the overall grade for the special teams. And this, to me, was a real downer. And I'm going to get to the point on what I want you guys to discuss, if you would. This pooch kicking business, twice. I mean, the first time was bad because I think UCLA converted on it. But a second time, I thought I was going to have to pick Kulkin up off the floor. It was unbelievable that they did it a second time.
Did anybody figure out why?
We
Well,
asked
Mark asked him. Mark, why don't you, since we're on it right now, we'll go through the group, Mark, Chris, Steve, and myself. Mark, you asked him the question. What was his response?
They thought they saw something there. Lincoln describes them not as pooch kicks, but sky kicks.
Oh,
Yeah, sky kicks. And, you know, apparently Alex didn't hit it high enough, was on the second one. The first one is what it is.
Did they think they could recover it? Is that what it was?
It came across as the players didn't execute as well as they could have. It's on video. It's on video. You can actually go back and watch the post-game interview.
What was the goal, though?
I'm sorry?
What was the goal of doing it?
I think they were trying to kick it high around the 10 or 15 yard line and cover it.
But it was getting to like the 25, 30 yard line. So at that point, you're thinking, you know what, just kick it out of bounds.
Right.
Or if you're kicking it short, right onside. You know what? make that the goal of the thing. Because, giving UCLA, who's a very good offensive team, a short field,
Crazy.
is, okay, thank you. That's a politically correct way of putting it. I
Sorry to
agree.
interrupt.
No, you, trust me, the language I would have used would have been a lot more abrasive.
I can guarantee that he would have done that.
So, as far as Dennis Lynch and the field goals, I understand the first one that he missed, he kicked the holder's foot. The other chip he flat out missed. Chip Kelly, you get to take the blame for him making the 49-yarder. Next time, stop calling timeouts. UCLA has a habit of calling a timeout at the most dumb time of a game. This one came out to be the 3 points was the deciding factor now, right?
Right.
48-45.
Yep.
Can't go back to the end of the first half, but you know what? If Chip Kelly doesn't call that timeout, Dennis Lynch misses that initial 49-yard field goal.
Right.
And USC only punted one time. And it happened to be at the very end of the game. So I don't know. What kind of grade do you want to give that? A lot of that to me is NA. How's that? We're going to go not applicable.
Chris, what'd you think of those sky kicks?
I hated them so much. Look, we had this conversation last week, and I begged the coaching staff, just kick it into the end zone, right? Please, just kick it in the end zone. It's not like this is the first time that you saw it and said, well, that's kind of a strange strategy. It doesn't seem to be a good idea. And here's the thing. So Riley says UCLA has a good return team. Okay. But how many times over the last 20, 25 years, however, how many times has USC given up a kick return for a touchdown? I mean, I remember Maurice Jones-Drew in 2006 running one back. I'm sure it's happened a couple of times. Here's my point.
Zach, last year it happened.
The Oregon game. So this is something that's going to happen every few years. You have literally you're going to have in a season like this, you're going to have what? 60, 70, 80 kickoffs. And the likelihood is that not a single one of them would go for a touchdown. Realistically, what you're trying to avoid is giving up a big return where they get to the 40, 45 midfield. And in order to avoid the likely bad outcome, we're literally giving them the likely bad outcome. It's the stupidest thing in the world, and it frustrates the hell out of me. I'm not going to give an NA. I'm going to give an F, and the F is not to the players. It's to Lincoln Riley and his staff. I know we're going to get all kinds of comments on YouTube. No, I'm not asking to bring Clay Helton back. If you've ever actually read or listened to me ever over the last 3 or 4 years, you know that. I'm just saying that was dumb, and it needs to stop. Kick it into the end zone. He can do it. He does it almost every time. Kick it into the end zone. On Dennis Lynch, I'll say this. I don't trust our field goal unit. I don't. But he showed some mental toughness coming back and making that 49-yard kick after essentially having 3 out of 4 misses when you include the one that got wiped away by the timeout. So you know what? Good for him. That's a kid that went up there and nailed it when it would have been very easy for him to go in the tank. So now, does that mean that I trust that field goal unit if we're down 2 to Notre Dame late in the game? I do not. But he came through in a very tough situation. So kudos to him.
I'm going to give Steve the exact quote from Lincoln Riley after the game on the sky kicks. Okay, we didn't hit a good ball. We hit it about 10 to 15 yards shorter than we wanted to. We did a good job covering the kicks. Other than that, they're dangerous. They've done a really nice job in kickoff returns all year. So we wanted to give them a few different looks. End quote.
Okay.
That's your answer.
Steve, your response to that, besides okay?
Obviously, I thought it was the wrong thing to do. I couldn't figure it out. I was yelling in my living room, I believe. You know, not to nitpick here or anything, but I guess
No,
it
of
is
course not.
nitpicking, really. Am I the only one that noticed on the drive at the end when they had to punt, that they were snapping the ball with all kinds of time still left. They never let it go down. And those are precious seconds. Had they not done that, UCLA would have had even less time to try to make a drive, and it could have really been crucial.
And it was a good
think-
punt too.
Yeah, and I think coming with, the games coming up, they ought to look at that and make sure that, just like at Utah when he screwed up the clock, and when you go back to that, his mismanagement of the clock there at the end is what prevented USC from having an undefeated season.
I did
So-
notice that, and it wasn't only on the punt unit. The offense, when there was about 6 minutes left in the game,
Right,
and USC
right.
was in a position where they wanted to run clock, they're snapping it sometimes with like 27 seconds. And it's not
Exactly.
that they were running, it's not that they were doing tempo. They weren't running up to the line to get some sort of tactical advantage. They run a quick play. No, they were still standing around. They just weren't standing around long enough.
Right.
I agree. They could have run down the clock and should have been in the middle and late in the fourth quarter. That was a mistake.
You're winning the game. You're
Yeah.
in front, right?
Maybe they were waiting for the umpire to stand over the ball for too long again and help them out. Who knows?
Maybe.
Well, they ought to look at
Well,
it.
the one thing that you can never get back is clock. This is a continuing theme about clock management. And they're gonna have to take a real hard look at what they're doing and express it to their team. Now, I don't know if Caleb is, told just snap it, we'll worry about clock management, but when you start giving up 10 to 12 seconds and you start adding up all those seconds, all of a sudden the other team gets an advantage that they should have
Right.
never had.
Right.
And I hope in the last 3 games, it doesn't happen, but you're gonna be playing against, quote, maybe better people. It all comes back to bite you. And clock management is so important in any sport where clock is involved. You just can't give away time. You have to know how to manage it when you're on offense. You have to know how to manage it actually when you're on defense as well. So, all right, how about a overall final team grade for the win over UCLA? What is your grade, Mark?
A.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, it's an A.
Okay, Steve?
Hey,
Okay, and I'll go A minus. All right.
One of the classic wins in USC history against a rival to keep the national title hopes alive. I'm glad I didn't have you in high school, Katz. I probably wouldn't have gotten into a college.
Chris, if you would have been one of my students, it would have been an awesome privilege to debate you. Let's put it that way.
All right.
All right. Now, what about the officials? Did you feel the officials did a good game? Did a good job in this game?
I thought so.
Yep,
thought
I didn't
so.
screw it up.
Mark, what'd you think? Did you like the officials?
Yeah, they had a couple of things that I had grievances with. I mentioned, standing over the ball and forcing USC to have to use a timeout. It was just that type of stuff. No, I'll give them
Nothing
a
major.
C minus.
A C minus?
C minus.
Okay.
I don't like them.
I would have never guessed that. Chris?
I'll give him a B. It wasn't a train wreck, and every week I expect a train wreck, so I'll take it.
Steve?
I'd say B plus. You didn't notice, I didn't notice anything major.
And I'm going to give them a B plus as well. And I tell you what I did like is they did have a screw up, and they came on and they basically said, I made the wrong call or something of that nature. And I said, well, that's refreshing that he was able to correct himself on national television. And I thought for the most part they did a pretty good job. Like any other, like all sports, umpires, whatever. If you're not talking about them, they did a good job. So kudos.
You guys are going to give them an inch, and they're going to take a mile if you keep giving them gratitude. So keep them at arm's length.
All right, now, a quick bonus question. We talked about this somewhat, so we don't have to go into depth on it, but where does Corey Foreman's interception rank in the pantheon of great defensive moments in USC football history? Do you think it's a top 5 that you've seen in your lifetime, or what you've read about? What's your thoughts?
Yeah,
Mark?
it's definitely top 5. I mean, I'm trying to think of other ones that I would put over that right now, and it's having a hard time. I mean, the first thing that keeps popping into my head is the George Achika block. But after that, I'm kind of at a blank right now.
Chris, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, I'm curious what our USC football historian has to say, but I'm having trouble coming up with another play that was that crucial in such a big setting.
Yeah.
Steve, you've been called out now on your knowledge of SC football. Where does this
Well, I
one?
think, single plays, there's been some great defensive. Adrian Young, 4 interceptions against Notre Dame. But the play that would stand out to me would be, and I know I'm going back, but Bill Hayhoe blocked an extra point. He blocked some field goals too. He blocked an extra point in the 1967 game that USC won 21-20 for the national championship. The Rose Bowl, everything was at stake, absolutely everything. The conference title, the Rose Bowl, and the Heisman was up there, but Gary Beeman ended up winning it. But Hayhoe's block was enormous. But this ranks right up there, especially at USC UCLA moments.
Yeah, that I'm restricting mine to USC versus UCLA,
right.
not in complete history.
It's up there.
Oh yeah.
I agree with Steve. I thought of Bill Hayhoe too. I was there when he did it. In fact, that was by design by McKay. I think Hayhoe actually got another one earlier, and
He blocks some field goals.
yeah. But the point is that he did make a major impact. I mean, you lose by a point.
Oh,
Big memory there. So I think it's one of the top 10 moments in SC UCLA history, but then I've been watching the games for so long that that list could expand. But it definitely is going to be remembered for a long time. All right, let's move on. It's time for Here Come the Irish. Panel, we're going to quickly transition to this week's final regular season opponent, the number 13th ranked Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Kind of what we did last week, which I thought came over rather well. List for me your 3 greatest Trojan victories in your lifetime over Notre Dame in the Coliseum. That means we're not talking about 4th and 9 at Notre Dame Stadium. We're talking about strictly games played in the Coliseum. Steve, let's start off with you. What are your 3 greatest Trojan victories in your lifetime over Notre Dame in the Coliseum?
well, I think 1974 would have to be first, when they're down 24-6, then proceed to score. Anthony Davis runs the second half kickoff back, and they proceed to score 49 points in the second half. I think that's the greatest comeback a lot of us have ever seen in college football. It's just miraculous. You couldn't believe it when you were watching. Boy, there's so many. There was one earlier in '64. Notre Dame was undefeated, came in the Coliseum, led 17-0 at half, and USC comes back and scores a winning touchdown on the final minutes from Craig Fertig to Rod Sherman pass, wins the game, knocks Notre Dame out of the national championship. And then I would say the Anthony Davis 6 touchdown game, when he ran back 2 kickoffs and scored 4 other touchdowns to beat them. Those 3 would have to rank very high in my memory book.
Chris, how about your memory book? What does it say for 3 wins in the Coliseum over the Irish?
Well, I guess technically Some of these were in my lifetime, but I was too young to appreciate them. I'll tell you the game that I will always love was a streak breaker game in 1996. And part of that was that I grew up, my first season as a USC fan was 1984. If you think about what that means from the time I become a USC fan at the age of 11 until I'm in law school in 1996, I do not see USC beat Notre Dame. And Lou Holtz had been there for, I think his first season was 86, which was my first time going to a game at the Coliseum. I guess we'll talk about that in a second. I have Notre Dame PTSD to this day because in my formative years, the only thing I ever saw was Notre Dame beating us. Sometimes it was a beatdown and it wasn't competitive. Sometimes it was a heartbreaking game, but it was always the same outcome. To finally see USC win, even though it was a crappy USC team and it was a meaningless game, but to finally beat the Irish and to beat Lou Holtz and to do it in a game where, frankly, it looked like Notre Dame was going to put it away. All they had to do is make an extra point, and that game is over. That is still one of my 3 or 4 favorite USC games in history, just because finally I got to see us beat those guys. I love that game. It wasn't very well played. I love it. That's the big one that jumps out to me in terms of the Coliseum. I mean, the game, Carson Palmer's senior year when USC was playing a close game at the half, they may have been tied. It was very close. And frankly, USC didn't play very well, but it was quite obvious after the first half that as soon as USC just stopped screwing up, they're going to blow them out. And sure enough, they blew them out. They beat them by 31 points. That was the game that probably iced the Heisman Trophy for Carson.
Oh, yeah.
That was a fantastic game and one I really enjoyed. So those are going to be my 2.
All right. Mark?
Yeah, I wasn't at the game. I was 7 years old, but you guys talked about, 55-24. So that was in my lifetime. Mark Cusano, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I cried like a baby when I saw that ball hit the floor. And I still get a little welled up when I watch replays of it. So Chris, I don't have the PTSD that you do, but I'm still living in the moment of this past weekend. But for me, Notre Dame is still USC's #1 rival. UCLA, as Lincoln Riley likes to, put his players 1A, 1B. UCLA is 1B on the rivalry chart. And then you mentioned Carson Palmer, 2002. I don't know if that record's been broken yet, but 425 yards, 4 touchdowns. USC put up 610 yards of offense in that game when they got out of their own way. So yeah, it was the beginning of 3 in a row where they beat the Fighting Irish by 31 points. And yeah, it did clinch his Heisman Trophy. And we're seeing some similarities right now, 20 years later. Carson had a nice game against UCLA. Caleb had a nice game against UCLA. Notre Dame is right around the corner. And man, does history repeat itself? So it's all setting up well and good. Those are my 3 favorite memories of USC at the Coliseum versus Notre Dame.
All right. Well, my 3 would be 1964, Rod Sherman. It was 84 Z corner, something like that. Or it was amazing. I mean, it was like dreamland to see it. And I'll never forget it. I was 14 years old at the time, so I was old enough to really comprehend what was going on.
That was a great Notre Dame team.
That was a great Notre Dame team. Just one of the many horror shows for Ara Parseghian,
Right.
Hall of Fame coach. When he came to LA, he says, "I'm sick of seeing that horse run around." At that time, there was a track,
Right.
and he says, "I'm getting tired of watching him go around." The 1974 game, though, for pure like unbelievable comeback. I wish every fan that's coming to the game on Saturday, hopefully it's a sellout, could watch that game and look at the reaction of the crowd. Because I tell you, if this team got a backing like that 74 team did in the second half, the whole building would probably fall down. It was unbelievable. And our colleague Kevin Bruce had a hand in that with a big fumble recovery and a big hit. It was just, I invite everyone to go to YouTube and look up the 1974 game. One of the classics is Trojans' late great radio broadcaster Tom Kelly was saying, "It is unbelievable. The Trojans are tearing the Irish apart." And to me, it was like a big thrill. My other one, I will say, was 1996 was Cusano. I was with my son, and my son came along at a time when SC was not doing well, shall we say, and he'd say, "Dad, why are you so upset at SC?" I said, "Because I'm comparing it to the SC that I know." And then when Cusano knocked that ball, it was terrible conditions in the Coliseum. The wind was blowing, it was freezing. And I remember when DeLon Washington ran the ball in, and it was amazing. And then when Cusano did it, it was almost as unexpected to me as, in a way, that Corey Foreman did it. It was like, really? And then it just ended like that. It was amazing. Now,
Super gutsy call on that 2-point conversion too, because I remember he ran a counter play. And Notre Dame was a bigger, more physical team than USC, and I was stunned that Robinson just ran a counter and just went, "We're just going to man up and beat you like we used to 10 years ago, or 20 years ago." Yeah, great game. I love it. Just thinking about it right now makes me happy.
It's just such a great rivalry, and the young people coming up should realize how. If you ever walk the Notre Dame campus the day of the SC Notre Dame game, it's an atmosphere unlike any you've ever seen. And if I can just give one brief little story.
Steve, how about that story you told me about?
Yeah, I wanted to share that one little story. It was in the 1960s, and the night before every big game in Notre Dame, they have a big rally. They used to have it in an old dilapidated field house. And I mean dilapidated. Looked like it was going to collapse at any minute. And they allowed the media, they allowed 2 of us, or 3 of us from LA to come in and watch. And the field house, there were actually bats flying around the field house. Real bats, that's how old it was. And the kids, the noise, you couldn't hear anything. And the kids were tossing people up in trampolines and everything. But finally the thing gets started. This is all before the thing gets started, and the lights go out, and they want to call out the guest of honor for the evening. And Rocky Bleier, former great halfback and the later Pittsburgh Steelers star, comes limping out with a cane directly from Vietnam. He was hurt in Vietnam. He walks up to the microphone, and it's just complete silence. And he says, "Let's win one for the guys in the rice paddies." And the place just went bonkers. I've never heard louder reaction in my life. Incredible. That's the kind of series it is.
It is. That is the kind of series it is. So let's transition now to the 3 greatest disappointments against the Irish in the Coliseum. Steve, what were they for you?
I don't know if I can remember 3. I try to forget them. One that leaps out of me is a 51-0 terrible slaughter in the rain. I think it was the year Joe Theismann was it Joe Theismann? The regular quarterback was not in the game. Coley O'Brien, a backup quarterback Notre Dame, to a 51-0 romp over a John McKay team that was that led to McKay's famous line that 500 million people in China could care less about this game. That's not the exact quote, but it's roughly. I think that would rank right up there. The Lou Holtz game with Rocket Ismail, when USC had a shot at a national title, and Holtz came in and just completely outcoached everybody, and they won easily. Those are the two that stand out to me just off the top of my head.
That's okay.
There
Chris,
were worse ones in South Bend, but you're talking about the Coliseum.
yeah, just the Coliseum, right? Chris, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
that 1988 game, the 1-2 game that Notre Dame won 27-10. I
That
think
was Lou Holtz, yeah.
yeah, to this day, that is probably the most disappointing USC game I've ever seen. I said a few minutes ago, I'd become a fan in 1984. I had not seen USC compete for a national championship. And after beating Troy Aikman and the Bruins, I thought for sure that was our year. And one of the frustrating things about that game was that, it was a handful of turnovers really that didn't end. Notre Dame didn't move the ball in that stupid game. You go look at the stats. I just did this recently. I don't know why I did it to myself, but Notre Dame had like 200 yards offense in that game. They had like a handful of first downs. They didn't do anything all day, but they had an interception return for a touchdown. Aaron Emanuel put the ball on the ground. They had a big run early in the game on an option that Tony Rice took.
Rocket Ismail, yeah.
Yeah, it was just, Rocket Ismail on a play action pass from their own end zone gets a huge play. I mean, they did nothing all day and took away that dream season. That one hurt so bad. The other one that stands out to me was my very first USC Notre Dame game, 1986, because that was a game that USC led by 17 points going into the fourth quarter. And just a nightmare scenario. USC was trying to ice the game with a quarterback sneak on 4th and 1 down on Notre Dame's side of the field. It looked to everybody in the stadium that Rodney Peete fell forward about 2 yards, and they didn't give USC the first down, and they didn't measure, which it's one of those things that happens when you play Notre Dame. Tim Brown had that long punt return at the very end to set up a chip shot field goal to win it. That was just that one hurt bad. Those are the two that I remember the most of all the games that have given me PTSD. Those are the two that really sting to this day.
Mark, what three sting for you?
Yeah, all I'm going to add to the 1988 game is, will someone please tackle Tony Rice one time? That's all. He's the reason why USC lost that game, not Rocket Ismail. It was Tony Rice, in my opinion.
Okay.
With that said, another disappointing game at the Coliseum. They didn't lose, but that tie in 1994, that kind of sucked. They had I don't know, how many points were they ahead by before they gave up that lead and ended up taking the tie?
Less than 10.
Less than 10. So they didn't lose, but it was very disappointing. And then for me, you just wish that he made the catch. Ronald Johnson in the rain with Mitch Mustaine.
Good point.
Yeah, that was
Man, just catch the ball and you walk into the end zone. Literally, he would have walked into the end zone.
That's the flip side of what we saw with Corey Foreman this past week, right? Ronald Johnson was a great football player for USC. He made a lot of plays. He was fantastic, but I can't hear the name without thinking of that play. I just can't.
And that's what he goes down in history with.
Yeah, I wish I didn't, but I can't. I can't help it. It's what I think of.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've touched on some of the ones that I've done, but brief memory, the 1966 game, 51-0. It was a brutality. They should have been arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department for the brutal assault they had on SC. It was unbelievable. For me, also 1969, SC was number 1 in the country, and Notre Dame had come in. And at that time, Notre Dame was an all-boys school, so there was kind of a mystique to them. They hadn't gone co-ed yet, and the game ended in a 21-21 tie. And I expected more out of Simpson, and they just couldn't block Notre Dame. And there was a play that was a big running play of about 70 yards in the first quarter, and I said, "Oh, it's going to be a long day." And they rallied at the end of the half, but in the end, it was 21-20 and 21. And to me, those were the days where, boy, ties were just the worst. And then 1988, 27-10. The biggest play in that game, from my perspective, was an interception by a guy named named Stan Smagala. And Stan Smagala took it to the house. And then what happened after that was like, oh my gosh, you know what? He can't do that. And they did do that. And in the end, you know, it was a chance. It probably was a turning point for, I think, Larry Smith at the time. And it just kind of sunk his whole program. They never quite recovered from it. So, all right, let's speed up here to a question that'll transition to Thursday's program, but let's do a little teaser here. How much will the victory over UCLA affect the Trojans on Saturday night against the Irish? Steve, are they going to have any hangover from what happened against the Bruins?
It's a good question. Physically too, you know, it was a grueling game. You like to think it won't. I'm not sure all these transfer players realize what kind of rivalry this is. You worry a little bit about that. But with everything at stake, they should certainly not have any problem getting up for it. I don't think. We'll hope.
Chris, what do you think?
You know, it's hard to play these rivalry games back-to-back weeks, but I think the UCLA game is a plus, actually. I think this team really believes that whatever happens, they can find a way to win. And I think they genuinely believe, whether they're right or not, I think they genuinely believe they can win their next 4 games. I think they believe it. So I expect that they'll come out and play very well. And the physicality of the UCLA game was a problem, but let's face it, UCLA is going to win this game by outrunning the Irish secondary and by Caleb Williams being Superman. So they'll be all right.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, if USC wasn't as highly ranked as they are now, knowing they already have the conference championship game in the rearview mirror, they're going. They know that if they beat Notre Dame, that conference championship game is the next step to the playoffs. So yeah, to Steve's point, you hope that they're up for it. The players, from what I understand, they're actually taking, I won't say they're taking tests, but they're watching videos. They're being taught about these rivalries. So it's part of the weekly practice process. I don't think it's going to have an effect. There's just too much at stake. And this coaching staff, there's just too much intensity behind them. The players know what's ahead of them. I can't see them going 13-9 against Notre Dame. Let's just put it that way.
You spoke that out in the universe, Mark.
I'm sorry?
You spoke that out into the universe, Mark.
I can't see that happening. Too much offense with this team to go.
Well, I would have had a big concern had we lost the game to UCLA. Notre Dame's won 5 in a row. They're rehabilitating their season, so they think. They're coming to LA, which is a big thing for Notre Dame to end their season. I was watching the Marcus Freeman's press conference this morning from South Bend, and he was talking about how different it is when you play USC in October as opposed to coming out here. In fact, interesting part is Marcus Freeman said he's the head coach. If you don't know who he is of Notre Dame, he said that he played at Ohio State, and he says he remembers how challenging it was to come out, and he was a starting linebacker at the time. They came out here and they got blitzed by Ray Malaluga and all the other Trojans at that time. He says it's a difficult thing to come to the West Coast. My thing about USC is I think they really do believe in one step at a time. And, having followed the team for as long as I have, one way or the other, writing about them or talking about them or what have you, I've seen SC teams when they're good. It doesn't matter if they're playing UCLA and Notre Dame. They seem to understand that UCLA is the stepping stone to play Notre Dame. And this is not a great Notre Dame team. When I first looked at the score against Boston College, I think it was 44-0. Then I watched some highlights of it and I said, well, wait a minute. Then I looked at the record of Boston College. They were like 2-5, 2-6. But I think if the crowd is there and comes in ready to root for SC, I think SC, there'll be remember, it's going to be senior night for USC this time. Last week was UCLA had it. So it'll be very interesting to see how this team adjusts to it when that time comes. So, all right, let's move on and wrap this thing up. Halftime viewer questions, panel answers. It's halftime. Question 1 from Rick in Playa del Rey. If the USC ND game does not sell out, what does that say about college football fans in LA?
The game will be sold out. Don't worry about it.
Well, I guess we don't have to finish that question. Mark is saying it's a done deal.
Does anybody disagree that this game will not be sold out?
No.
I'd be stunned if it's not. Stunned.
It would be very sad. I think, remember what Lincoln Riley said at the end of the press conference? He basically was saying,
Get
"You
your
guys
butts in the stadium.
this one.
Yeah.
This is the one." And I will tell you something, having been to the games this year, obviously, when they have, 50,000, 60,000, that Coliseum is going to look a lot different with 77,000 in there. And you look up and you don't see red seats, you see bodies in seats. It'll make a big difference. All right, question from Dimwit in Oxnard. What do you think USC's record would be if Caleb Williams was not the quarterback?
That's a good question.
8 wins.
Maybe 8.
Jackson Dart is still winning games with this team. He's not Caleb Williams. He's a good football player. He's not Superman. I don't know what the answer is. They might be 8-3. They might be 9-2. I don't know. But Caleb Williams is the best player in the country and by far the most important player on this team.
It wouldn't be 10-1. Let's put it that way.
No, it would not be.
Well, Miller Moss would be the quarterback, and you have to ask yourself,
No, it wouldn't be. If Caleb Williams wasn't here, Jackson Dart never leaves.
Well,
Jackson Dart's the starter in this game if Caleb Williams is.
Well, I think the question was posed that if Caleb Williams, let's say, got hurt or something early in the
You
season.
spoke that into the universe.
Yeah, it just says was not the quarterback.
What is going on with you two guys?
It was a very ambiguous question. It was not the quarterback.
Oh, man, gosh.
I would say that their record would be 8-4 at best. That's my opinion. Question 3 from Surfer Dude in San Clemente. I know this is a repeat question, but why in the world would the Trojans attempt 2 pooch kicks when the first one was a disaster? Who is telling him to do this? My only comment is we've gone over this. It's the coaching staff, which begs the question again, do they need a special teams coach? What do you guys think?
No, look, if you go over to the WeAreSC site, Eric McKinney, he spelled it out really well. He listed where USC ranks compared to some of the other highly ranked teams, special teams, statistically. With Georgia and USC and Ohio State, they all kind of suck. They're at the bottom of the statistics. So maybe that's how Lincoln Riley looks at it. We're great offensively, we're opportunistic defensively, and we do enough what we need to do on special teams to win.
You know what they need? They need before every kickoff just to give me a call on my cell phone and ask, hey, should we kick it to the 26 or should we kick it in the end zone? And I'll tell them. That's what they need.
Right. Kick it to the end zone.
All right, question 4 from South Bend, Sammy. Does USC have to jump out with a big lead over Notre Dame early to get into the head of Irish quarterback Drew Pine?
They don't have to. It'd be nice. But USC, they don't have to. The truth is that Drew Pine is mediocre and USC can come back from a deficit. So they don't have to. But I sure hope they do. Make things fun.
I think the question is do they want to make Drew Pine throw the ball?
Correct.
And the answer is obviously yes.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right, question 5 from Tom in El Monte. Do you think that Corey Foreman, after the UCLA game, has turned the corner and will finally play like he did in high school? I think, Chris, you touched on it. You're not expecting a miracle, but is he going to play better? I say he is going to play better.
I don't know. I just don't think that, I don't think he is the player that we wanted him to be. And I don't think he ever will be, but he'll forever have that play. So good for him.
Absolutely. And final question here from Jessica in Long Beach. To your knowledge, does Caleb Williams have a girlfriend?
The answer is yes. She's a cute girl. Last week she was dating DTR.
Very good.
Gavel just went down.
Only the Arledge could have come up with that type of comment. All right. A reminder, if you have a question or comments for our panel, either go to WeAreSC message boards and click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listener questions. And that will do it for Tuesday's first half edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Reminder that on Thursday's edition of the Huddle, we'll kick off the second half with a deeper preview of the Notre Dame game and give you our Pac-12 game predictions for the upcoming weekend. So until Thursday, a big thank you again to our great panel of Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Steve Bisheff, and a special big thank you to all of you for watching and listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Hoping you're having a great weekend. Have a happy Thanksgiving wherever you may be. Go Trojans. And until this Thursday, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, wishing you all fight on, everybody.